Happy New Year, and this is our January 14th Site Advisory Group meeting. And tonight we're going to be providing an update on the pipeline and facility design. Next slide, please. As usual, we'll start tonight's meeting with some introductions, and then David Peters is going to give us a project update. And then we have some of our design team members here tonight to talk about some pipeline and facility design work. And then we'll leave some time at the end of the meeting to have some discussion. Next slide, please. So as a quick refresher, you'll find your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. When you're not speaking, we ask that you mute your mic and turn off your webcam. I know that I've heard that there's been some internet issues out in the area where some of our neighbors are streaming in from. So if it becomes an issue, just let me know, and I'll ask our presenters also to keep their camera off, and hopefully that will help conserve some bandwidth. But we will pause throughout the meeting. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can use the chat, and I will stop our speakers so that we can address those issues. And then we'll also have questions or a spot for questions at the end and comments. Let's see, next screen. So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about how, introduce ourselves. We're going to ask, I'm going to call your name, and then you can tell me your New Year's resolution. I'm going to start with, let's see here. First on my screen, we start with the advisors. Pat Meyer.
Hi, y'all. I don't do New Year's resolutions. I find them to be not worth it. I try to do them all year.
Do you have any goals for the year?
Well, to honestly be able to get back into business.
It's a good goal to have.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see, who else do I have? Sean.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Oh, okay. Sean Narrison, Surface Nursery. I'm like Pat, I don't do New Year's resolutions. One thing I'm hoping to accomplish this year is maybe break ground on building a new home on some property we have. That's kind of my goal, I guess you'd say. So
it's a great goal to have.
Yeah. So
good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike Cowan.
I just got in late. What was the question?
The question is New Year's resolution, or if you just have a goal for the year, that works too.
Go to Canada.
Go to Canada, all right. So a few restrictions happening right now, but hopefully those will be lifted as time goes along and we can make some progress on this COVID situation.
Okay.
Let's see, who next do I have here? Andrew.
Hi everyone, Andrew Brown, the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. Also not big on resolutions, but I did set myself a goal to cycle 5,000 miles this year.
Wow, that's a lot of miles. Good luck. Daniel.
Hi, Daniel Newberry, Johns Creek Watershed Council. I also am not a big resolution person, but I do have a goal this year to improve my GIS skills. So right now at Portland Community College, I'm taking a one quarter course in GIS to improve my skills, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I bet too, though, it's probably one of the easier classes to take online. I know some of the other classes have been a little bit more difficult to, without being in person, to be engaged in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's ideal for online.
Great. All right, well, good luck. Jane.
Hello, everyone. I also don't do New Year's resolutions. I think the only thing I'd really like to do more of right now is some of my painting.
Ah, that would be great. Dean and Pat, I don't think your audio usually works, but I don't want to assume that it's not working. But I can see in the chat that you don't do New Year's resolutions either, but goals would be projects around the property. And I agree with that one as well. There's always stuff to do around the house. Let my husband know that too. Let's see, I think that I've had all of the site advisors. I'm going to skip any of our guests just because we want to kind of conserve time and focus on people that are on the advisory group. But also we're going to move on to our presenters. And let's start with Brad. He's the new guy on the block.
Yeah, well, my New Year's resolution is to kick 2020 behind us. And part of that COVID-19, if you haven't heard, is the addition of 19 pounds. So I'm looking forward to get back into the arena of working out to remove the COVID-19 that's been developed over the past 10 to 12 months.
Yes, I think that would be a goal for a lot of people. Ben.
I guess my goal is to resume what we did in 2019, and that's to travel and ride my bike while I travel.
Good goal. Might have some trouble flying places, so riding your bike's a good idea.
It's a goal.
Yeah. All right, Ken.
So my goal is to get a vacation somewhere warm this, hopefully this spring, but I'll take fall if that's what it takes. So like Hawaii or the Caribbean.
Perfect. Casey.
Hi, everyone. Casey Hagerman from MWA Architects. My New Year's resolution was to finish all the projects I started last year before starting any new ones this year. We'll see.
Oh, I really need you to come talk to my husband. All right, let's see. Jeff.
Good evening, everybody. Jeff McGraw, MWA as well. And my goals are simple. Get back to the office as soon as possible. Kind of tired of working at home.
Yeah, it's been nice for a while, and then, it just kind of gets old after a little while. I'll agree with that. Let's see, and then I think I have, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Hurst from NNA Landscape Architecture. My goal this year is to work out more. And I also want to apologize. My camera's not working tonight, but I'm here.
No problem. All right, well, I'm Benita Oswald, and I am coordinating the communications for this project. And my goal for the year is just to keep everybody in my family healthy. So hopefully I can manage to do that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, I forgot about David Peters, because actually I didn't really forget about him, but he's going to be presenting next. So I'm just going to have Dave go next, and then just get right into your updates.
Will do. Thank you, and Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to be back with you this evening. Hopefully you all survived that wet weather we had the last couple days, and I know that's been upsetting a lot of our employees' network challenges working from home. So I hope things have been working out for you. I guess my New Year's resolution is similar to a couple others. I've resolved to get rid of that COVID-19. My rowing machine arrived, and so I've been getting started on it this year and have some goals to get in better shape. So as I do that, I assume that means more projects around the house and things like that will also come along, but we'll see how it goes. So with that introduction, I'll jump into just a project update on things we've been working on. over the last few months and through the holidays, we continued plugging away. You know, everyone's aware of the elections, and with that, we have had some new city council changes, and we have a new commissioner over the Water Bureau now. So with the Portland City Council, there, I'll just go through the council members. Mayor Wheeler was reelected. Joanne Hardesty was not up for election this time, so she's still with the council. And Dan Ryan filled Commissioner Nick Fish's position, and he was elected in a special election back in August. So he's actually been serving since then. And then there were two new members that started January 1st, Mingus Maps and Carmen Rubio. And so the mayor makes assignments for the different bureaus throughout the city, and he's assigned the Water Bureau to Mingus Maps. So he will be taking over the role that Commissioner Amanda Fritz used to fill for us. So we are looking forward to getting in to meet him. We'll probably be doing that next week to be able to provide an introduction both to the Water Bureau and our project. I think we've mentioned earlier this year that we hired the construction manager, general contractor. We commonly shorten that to CMGC contractor, and for the filtration facility. And the team that will be doing that is called MWH Kiewit. Those are two firms that formed a joint venture to do this project. And I bring that up. We've actually gotten to the point of having a pre-construction services contract with them. So they'll be on board helping us go through the design. We'll be able to have the contractor sitting by us and providing input about how things get constructed as we're actually designing the facility. And then they'll also be putting together cost for the cost of those facilities as we go forward. So we're looking forward to having them on the team and working with them. And you'll actually get to meet members of their team next month at our meeting. We'll be bringing them out to talk about some construction topics. In December, the City Council approved the pipeline design contract, and that's Jacobs Engineers is the firm that will be doing that. And Brad Phelps, who introduced himself a few minutes ago, represents Jacobs, and he'll be introducing some of those pipeline topics this evening and talking with you. And then council also approved us to move forward with hiring a CMGC contractor for the pipelines also. So that delivery method was approved, and we will be putting out a request for proposals from contractors, I believe in March, and hope to have that team on board towards the end of this calendar year. So those are the steps we've been taking to get our contracts in place to be able to do the design and construction. And then our filtration facility designers, who you've seen multiple times from Stantec Engineering, we've been working with them over this past year and their team, and putting together the facility design ideas. So the things we've been bringing back each month about site layout and all of that, they've been doing that work, and they finally got to the point of providing a written document, a draft of a written document that summarizes all that material that we've been sharing this past year. And we're reviewing that draft with the goal of having that available later this spring as a complete package on how we're going to move forward. So that's where all the information that we've shared and feedback we've gotten gets summarized into one working document. So that's been the big piece of work that's been going on over the last several months. So been quite a bit going on. And I guess associated with that and the work on the basis of design, let's see. Oh, this is good. So I wanted to show this at where we're at in our schedule. You know, when we started, I realized when I looked at this that we've been meeting since October of 2019. Back when we still had very little idea of what we were doing, as you were well aware at the time. And we've developed that and no more now that we've been working with you on. And so over that year and a half, we've gotten to the point that now we're getting ready to start the design for both the pipeline and the facility. And this highlights that we're 1/3 of the way through our compliance schedule. So we have a little under 7 years left to be able to come into compliance with the agreement that we have with the Oregon Health Authority. So still a long ways to go, still a lot to work out as we go through these designs. So that's the overview that I had for this month. And see if you have any questions on that.
All right, not seeing any hands here, so we will move on to our next part. I do want to acknowledge that Patricia is here now too. So Patricia, if you wanted to tell us your New Year's resolution, that was the question of the day.
Pardon me, I didn't, what was the question of the day?
What is your New Year's resolution?
Well, actually, I'm going to try to lose some weight and to start exercising. And I've been pretty good about it so far.
Well, that's been a common theme with a lot of people on the call today. Thanks for sharing. Let's move on now to Kim, talk about pipelines.
Ken Ackerman again with the Portland Water Bureau. And I'm going to, as Dave just said, one of our big things that at the end of last year was we got Jacobs under contract. And so that was middle of December, their contract got approved. So we're just getting them up to speed. And I thought I'd introduce Brad real quick and just have him say a few things about himself. And one of the reasons we hired him is his personal life intersects a lot with the stuff out here. So I'll let Brad introduce himself real quick.
Thanks, Ken. I'm Brad Phelps with Jacobs, and I do have a personal life outside of engineering. We have a farm over in Montana, that family farm. We operate about 10 square miles of dry land, wheat and canola and various products over there. And I get to enjoy going over about 3 times a year. I hate driving combine anymore because they're self-driving combines. Last time I drove a combine, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, when I handed over the wheel to my 8-year-old daughter at the time, because it's basically a push button process. Anyway, I do have rural roots, and it's a little bit different than being brought up in the city environment as an engineer. I've been in the engineering business for about 37 years now, all with the same firm. And my background is in large diameter pipeline infrastructure projects and water supply systems.
Thanks, Brad. And Brad's leading a team of 12, I believe, firms, 10 or 12 firms. So we have quite a good sized team involved. So, so just kind of history, where we've been, 2019, 2020. The planning work was laid at the end of, I think, middle of October. We selected the routes for the pipelines, the 2 pipelines in, the 2 pipelines out. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. And then Jacobs' contract got approved, and we're approved now to hire the CMGC. So we'll be starting that process for the pipelines starting late February, early March. So as we head into this year, we're really looking forward to actually getting into the design. But I will say it is a 2-year design process. So we're getting started. And then hopefully in early 2023, we'll be starting construction, and that'll be about 2.5 years for the majority of the construction. And then we'll have a little bit of wrap up actually after the filtration plant's done to take the existing conduits out of service and abandon those pipes mostly in place. So we'll go to the next slide. So I think it was July of last year when we talked about the pipelines, the routes, and the alternatives we were looking at. And we got a lot of community input. We also had an open house that we got input on the different pipeline routes as well. And that input was very helpful. We looked at it. We also looked at the engineering design and cost options. And I know there was a lot of input about the raw water side and different routes and maybe avoiding running through properties. And I will remind everybody that the long pipe is running along an existing easement that was purchased by the Water Bureau, mostly in the 70s and 80s, a few changes to it in the early 2000s. Well, but so we chose that route. It also helps us with resiliency. It gets us away from the existing pipes in the road. And then we would be doing the tunnel just north of the county line. We looked at some open cut options, and we looked at some of the impacts to those, and we chose to stick with the tunnel option. It's resiliency wise and surviving earthquakes. It's a solid option. We also got a lot of input on the option of running down Carpenter Lane. That option was not selected, so we're running down Dodge Park with both pipes until we get about 2/3 of the way up Dodge Park to Altman, and then we'll have one pipe going cross country and going over to Lustig Road, and then north up Altman from Lustig Road for both pipes, and tying into our existing conduits. So it was helpful. We do have a lot of those the input. It's that input that we've received is still going to be used. One of the things that we're looking at as we get into more detailed design is the two pipes in Dodge Park. There's still decisions to make. Do we put two pipes on one side, two pipes on the other side of the road, or do we put a pipe on each side of the road? And we are looking at that as far as like impact to traffic, which I know is a big concern. So that'll still be getting looked at over the next year, really. So jump to the next slide. So we talk about it being at 2 years, and I'm sure everybody's, what are we going to spend 2 more years doing? So the first part of this spring and summer, we're going to be gathering a lot more information. We have those preferred alignments. We've done some work on those alignments to determine if they're feasible or not. We need a lot more information to get into the detailed design. We'll be talking more about the geotech work we're going to be doing coming up. We've done a lot of the survey work. So actually you've seen surveyors out there along the roads, and late this fall, there was our Water Bureau surveyors were out along the raw water alignments, getting all the information on what exactly is there, trees, driveways, all that kind of stuff. So we'll be pulling all that together, looking at exactly where the pipe goes, how it winds through the different properties, where it fits in that 100-foot easement to make the most sense, what all the impacts are to trees, houses, existing utilities in the roads, where the tunnel goes exactly, where it comes up on the site. So that preliminary stuff is going to be done the first half of this year. We'll kind of do the same thing that the treatment plant did. We'll do a basis of design and lock all of that stuff down. It'll be reviewed by the Water Bureau, and we'll get all of that locked down, and then we'll start into the preliminary design, which is like a 30% design, getting all of that information onto plan sheets that go to the contractor. Eventually we'll go to the contractor. And so we'll review that at 30%. Starting into next year, then we'll go into a 60% design where we lock down even more of the details. And then at the end of 2022, we'll have a 90% design and be getting prices from the contractor on that. And then very quickly after that, doing construction documents, 100% package. So, but each one of those takes time. We review it. Takes time for Brad and his team to put those together, those plans together. And then it takes time for the Water Bureau to review it. And we're coordinating with the filtration team because the Water Bureau staff will be reviewing both of those, and making sure that they don't hit at the same time so we can actually get those reviewed. So, and I know everybody's, the Geotech work that we're talking about will be out there. This will be the third time. The first time we got some information, and then we went out and looked at more information on the alignments that we were looking at. Now we're going out and getting more detailed information in between. Right now we have a hole about every half a mile along the alignment. And for design, we like to have geotechnical information, what's below the ground, about every 500 feet. So that's what to expect during this first 6-month period of time. Is we'll be gathering a lot more information in the field. Brad's going to talk a little bit about the geotech work that's coming up in the next, starting in about 6 weeks. We'll also be having out Brad. Some of you may have seen, we were out in the field a couple weeks ago, actually last week, looking at the access and looking at how we're going to get some of the work done. So Brad will continue to be out there. I will continue to be out there working. And so Brad can kind of dive in a little bit more about exactly what we'll be doing. Brad, you want to jump in?
Yeah, let me get myself prepared here a little bit. We're onto that slide. So I've got about 4 slides here, giving you an idea of what life is going to look like for us and some impacts that you're going to have as a result of this drilling episodes out there for the next number of months. Again, like Ken said, what we're doing is we're filling in the gaps of the subsurface information on the specific alignments to have a better understanding of what exists underground. And we want to do that before the contractor gets out there, so we know what to expect before the contractor gets out there as well. We've got a generalized idea from what's the work's been done before. Now we're going to hone in on more detail by doing more borings. We plan to start this work here mid-February to 1st of March timeframe. Our work is going to be very similar to what you saw before with drill rigs out there. We're going to be typically drilling about 50 feet deep. And we'll also be doing possibly some potholing associated with identifying other underground utilities and their depths, so we don't have a conflict with our large diameter pipe and some of the other utilities that are out there. The additional borings, like I said, will start mid-February to the early March. We are going to be doing about 65 borings along both the pipeline routes total. So a total of 65 borings. Some of the work will happen in the public rights of way, and some work will happen within the easement or on private property. The locations of the borings have been discussed with the affected landowners, especially on the raw water pipeline. Ken's been doing a great job explaining to the people out there kind of what to expect and paving the way for us to come in here in the short order. The locations of access have been discussed and defined to us by Ken and the Portland Water Bureau. And what you see in this photo here is an example of a drilling rig called a rubber tire drill rig. You'll see this primarily on the roadway or the finished water pipeline alignment. This type of a vehicle requires a firm surface to drive upon so we don't rut up farm fields. We'll show another slide of a different type of drill rig here in the next slide. But in overall, the 65 borings we anticipate will take about 6 weeks of duration, but it is weather dependent. We don't want to go into a ponded mud field and disrupt a lot of the surface there. So especially on the raw water pipeline, you may see us hopscotching around a little bit and not going from one site to the next one in the sequence that you might think we would do. Next slide.
I just want to pause you for a second there, Brad. We had a question from Daniel. He's asking, can consultants talk about the predominant soil types in the pipeline route? We saw on our field trip that the PWB is heavily in a percent of clay, which caused drainage problems. I can imagine that clay soil may have some seismic issues as well.
So to answer the initial question, there is a bit of a difference in the soils between the raw water pipeline alignment and the finished water pipeline alignment that's been defined by the previous boring. The raw water pipeline is does have silts and silty gravels and some cobbles at the surface, which transit or change into deeper depths into what's called the spring water formation of silty and sandy gravels and cobbles. And then deeper than that goes into what's called the Troutdale formation. So it's kind of three lenses of soils out there. And when Ken started displaying some of the photos with the early rains that we saw here earlier this month and late last month, and the ponding that's going on, that is going to be a concern for the design, and we'll be addressing that. I'm not sure if that's answering your question though, Dan.
What do you think, Daniel? Did you have?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, one of the things we saw, and I'm hoping there'll be time to talk about this later, was that we understand that on the Water Bureau property, that there's a really high percentage of clay in the soils going down, at least for the 30 feet that the borings were down there. At least that's what we learned on the field trip. And as a result, that causes drainage problems. And I'm just wondering, you know, if the pipeline is going to go through an area that also has a lot of clay, are there some seismic issues that you have in that kind of formation, whereas you might not have it in a lighter soil like a gravelly or a loamy soil?
The loamy gravelly soil is a preferred option for pipeline design, but doesn't mean we can't contend with issues that erupt with the more plastic soils, I'll call them, that tend to move during a seismic event. And again, we'll need to be looking at that in further detail as we get further into design. But that is a concern, and we've got tools to address that for seismic resiliency.
And Daniel, I'll say that's one of the reasons we're getting a lot more information at very much tighter intervals along the alignment. So so we can help determine exactly what's there at what depths. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was kind of interested in that. I mean, with the heavier soils, you know, clearly they're going to move a lot more, but I mean, we know that with water pipelines, you do bed quite a bit around the pipelines with sand to prevent some issues there, but just kind of wondering about the impact if you do find a lot of heavy clay soils.
And that's the reason we're doing a tunnel as well, because we know that there's bad soils there.
Right,
so,
right. Thank you.
Just want to pause real quick again. Patricia had typed into the chat, improved corrosion control treatment is shown on the slide, and it isn't on the line. And it was just for reference, so that way it can help people understand where we're at on the map. So you're right, it's not on the pipeline route. It's just for to help people acclimate themselves on the map. Does that answer your question, Patricia? Okay, great. Go ahead and continue on, Brad.
Thank you. So along the finished water pipeline, we plan to do 37 borings. There were 14 borings done previously along the finished water alignment options. And again, most of the work will be done by the rubber-tired tractor, rubber-tired drill rig within the pavement area. As we get off of the pavement onto the north-south section, we may bring in the track rig due to the softer soils in that location. Similar to what's shown in the photo, there you see traffic control with the drill rig. We will have traffic control, and then each night the traffic control will be removed. The drill rig will be moved off of the road, and so off of the work hours between 8 and 4:30, the road will be returned to its normal traffic 2 lanes if we're in the right of way. And the road will be cleaned of any dirt and mud each night, so it doesn't become a hazard. Of course, the cones and the traffic control is for protection of workers and also the traveling public to move around the drill rigs each time. We will be shutting down 1 lane as we're drilling in the road, though. Each boring will take a couple days. It may run a little faster, may run a little slower. Our plan is to start at the filtration facility and work our way to the west and then to the north along Altman. In terms of the noise level that you may see here, it's going to be similar to what you might think of about a medium-sized tractor. In terms of the noise level, it's an engine that is a high RPM engine, and so it does have a little bit higher level of sound attenuation or sound emission. The highest noise level that you'll probably hear if you're nearby is we do drop a 140-pound hammer that drives a soil collection device into the ground so we can take a soil sample that's clean and not drilled through. So every so often we will be dropping a 140-pound hammer 2 or 3 or 4 times to drive this collection device into the ground to grab a sample so we can have a clean sample out of the ground. Next slide. So on the raw water side, similar to the finished water, we will be drilling 28 borings. 8 were previously drilled. And for this soft ground and the farm ground that we're going to be going through, we'll be using a track rig, they call it. It's like if you can envision a small tank on tracks, that's the type of device we'll be using here. We'll also be using another type of device that's called a sonic drilling rig that we use at the creek and the pond crossing for the trenchless crossings that you see that are in black. That particular type of a drill rig emanates a little bit more noise because it's run by an air compressor, and so you get a little bit more noise than the other 2 styles, but we're only using those in a few short sections here. We most likely will be starting at the Hudson Road intertie and moving towards the facility, but it will be weather dependent. We don't want to get out there in a muddy field and muck up everything. It causes a lot of issues for us to go back in and repair and make good, nor do we want to start it to begin with. So we may hopscotch around a little bit on the raw water side, but in general, we're going to work from the south to the north. When we get done with the borings, we will also be doing what's called geophysical assessments. And these are a couple guys in a pickup truck that will be running a wire along the ground that takes measurements that helps us define things in a little different fashion than just a single point boring into the ground. So is there any questions?
There's a couple of questions in the chat. They're both regarding the boring locations, and do we have a map of the 65 borings that we can share?
Ken?
Yeah, we have the locations and we can share those, and they are subject to a little bit of field adjustment once we get out there. Like we said, we're going to be potholing to make sure we don't hit any utilities and getting utility locates in, so we don't. But yes, we can share that. I'll work with Benita to get that out in the next week or so. And I will also say we're planning on doing both. So they're having 2 drill rigs out there at the same time. So we'll be working on the finished water and the raw water at the same time to try to get all that information gathered fairly quickly. So. Was there another question, Benita?
Not in the chat, but just searching for some hands. Anybody else have any questions for Brad or Ken on what they've talked about so far? All right, I think we can go on to the next slide. And that's me. I know that this is going to be noisy and this is going to be having some traffic impacts. And we definitely want to let the neighborhood know about these impacts, especially the ones that may impact your day. So our plan is we've been having some ongoing conversation with the property owners that these drillings will be happening in our easement along their properties, and with some of the other areas where we don't have easements, but we will be doing some drilling. But we'll also be putting out some postcards, and that will be within the weeks of 2 weeks of the actual drilling. So we'll be sending out some postcards to everyone in the area. We'll also have some door hangers. People will be going out and putting door hangers up within a week of the drilling. And depending on where you're at, you will get them, be rolling them out on properties. And then we will also keep our website updated. We have a specific page where we have construction updates, and that link will be on the postcards and the door hangers, so people can check for themselves if they have questions and more information. But I do know that, there's been some concerns about being able to get information out there. So if you have suggestions, I'm open to hearing any other thoughts on the best way to let people know about the drilling that's coming up. So let's see. I see emails, so we will be doing emails as well. We'll keep you, if you're signed up for our e-newsletter, that's the best way to get our emails. And you can sign up on our website. I'm pretty sure all of you are, but for those of you who are watching, I encourage you to sign up for emails. I don't see any other suggestions here, but I do see Daniel says, any decisions on the days of weeks and the time and day limitations for construction? I remember this was a popular topic in our earlier stakeholder meeting. And I think if we, Aubrey, if you could go a couple of slides back, there is that information about Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, and we're only keeping noise to those work hours. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Anybody?
We'll say, Benita, that is for the drilling work that's going on.
Yeah, for the drilling works. So is there anything else that anybody, let's see, Patricia says, will there be traffic alerts prior to the drilling work? Yes, that will be on the website, and we'll have the dates on the postcards and door hangers with the traffic and noise dates and times. Any other thoughts, ideas, questions about pipelines? Oh, noise level expectations. Will those that work at home be affected? Let Ken and Brad take that. I would imagine that it would be pretty noisy.
Potentially, yes. We are looking at that. We are trying to do things to mitigate that and work times. I know we've talked to one owner on the raw water side who, yes, has a few kids at home doing school and also works from home. So we're going to work with them on the time we drill and try to make sure that it avoids meeting times and times the kids are in school. So we're going to try to be working with people because we are going to be closer to some homes. And with everybody home, it may be a little more of an issue than it had been in the past. So we'll definitely work with people. So.
Great. I see Patricia says many people travel these roads but don't live here. How will you notify these people? Well, we have, we will be sending out the postcard will be to the 1,000 people that surround the filtration facility site, or 1,000 properties, households. And then I think it's actually more like 1,500, but every year we do send out a postcard that's within a 5-mile radius to let people know about the project and to encourage them to sign up for email updates. So hopefully that's what people are doing. We're open to other suggestions on how we can best let people know about these traffic impacts. Yeah.
Bonita, it looks like Jane has her hand up too.
Oh, okay, Jane.
A couple of items. As far as the traffic, I agree with Patricia, and most of, let's see, Lusted Road and or Dodge Park would be just pass-through travelers who do not live in the area. And I think you would do well to have like a reader board sign at the intersection of Altman and Dodge Park, and or at the Hudson and Lusted Road intersections to warn people ahead of time, because they're not going to read the postcard. And quite frankly, I think the reason postcards were not well received in the past is because of the volume of junk mail that most of us get in our mailbox. It easily slips into some of the other mailings that we receive. So take another look at that. Number two, primarily for Ken or Brad, discussion was made about the 100-foot easement. Is that, I am assuming that it's a Lusted Road easement perhaps? And is that on either side of the center of Lusted Road? And then part two of that same question, are you intending to use any of the existing pipes, 2, 3, or 4, or are you actually putting in 2 completely new pipes? And is one to be towards the south side of the road or river side of the road, and one to be at that's the north side actually, and one to be at the south side of the road?
Can you go back a couple slides, Aubrey? There we go, that one. So the 100-foot easement we refer to is the easement that the Water Bureau purchased that comes out of the Hudson intertie, yeah, right there, and then runs up. It's located west of Lusted Road, and we call it the 100-foot easement because that's how wide it is. For 99% of its length, it's 100 foot wide. So it is off of the right-of-way. I would say 500 feet, I'm making a guess. I should probably know. And then once you get to north of Dodge Park, it actually curves around a little bit. So there's nothing currently in it. So that will be one new pipe running from Hudson up to the county line and just north of the county line. Then we will have a second pipe that ties into the existing pipes in Lusted Road and run straight west there, and they both will go through the tunnel together there to the filtration site. We will
So
go ahead.
Second pipe, it's the second pipe that I'm interested in. You're not reusing pipe 2, 3, or 4.
So from Hudson's intertie to that location on where the second pipe ties in, we will be reusing existing pipes from, we were using existing pipes from Hudson to that location.
Okay.
So we're not replacing those pipes. They're in a condition that they're usable, and we can control all the flow at Hudson's to take the flow that's coming into there and get it into those 2 conduits. We only need 2 to get the flow we need.
So is the intertie already set up to accommodate the eventuality of the 2, or you'll have to do more construction work eventually when the new pipe is in place?
So we will tie into the 2 pipes at the north end. At the current Hudson's intertie, there is a connection set up to tie in the new pipe that will run along that 100-foot easement.
Okay,
So,
that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
and at Hudson, we have the ability then in the future to run the water up the existing pipes or in the new pipe, or both, or one or the other. So,
Especially for testing.
well, yes, especially for starting up, yes, at the plant and testing and everything. Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions anybody has? I'm looking for hands, no hands. I don't see anything in the chat. Thanks for that tip on the reader boards, Jane. Do you have your hand still up? So if you want to, if you don't have a question, you can put that down. Anybody else?
Anita, do you want to talk about the geotech work on the filtration site itself that will be in April?
Yeah, so we're, after this geotech work is complete, then there is a plan to also have some geotech work onto the filtration site. So there will be drilling in the area that they're expecting to have for an additional month after this, the pipeline drilling is happening, but we'll keep you posted on that as well. At the same site you can go to find out the latest information, but we will be sending out information and putting up door hangers for those that are going to be the most impacted by that sound. Any other questions, thoughts? All right, then I think we can move on to the next slide there, and we're going to talk about facility design.
Hi again, everyone. Casey with MWA. Tonight, I want to provide you an update on some of the design activities we've been working on and the current status of our site and facility design. Next slide, please. The last time we discussed site layout options back in August, I think it was, we were still testing the north and south campus concepts. The design team worked this fall on developing the appropriate facility footprints within the optimal build area shown on the left. And then we tested various facility layouts. For each layout option, our team analyzed the excavation strategies and impacts. We tested circulation and expansion options, and we developed stormwater control strategies. We have had additional workshops with the Water Bureau this fall and winter, and the preferred site layout strategy is now based on the North Campus design. This layout concept provides better options than the South concept for the treatment process itself and the water flow through the plant. It does cluster the facilities further north and east, making for a more compact development, which means less excavation overall. And it allows for options of site entry from either the north or the south. The access design and road alignment work are still being studied by the team, and we don't have much of an update for you tonight. The image on the right shows the general extent of the main facility development, and the team is still studying the requirements for the pipeline, as we just heard, and how those will interface with the facility itself once they get on the site. I want to note that the final location of the communications tower is still under study as well, and we're trying to limit its visual impact by locating it nearer the eastern tree line, as opposed to putting it on the top of the hill like we showed you guys last year. So we are still working on what that tower will be and where it is best located, but we're trying to keep it tight to the facilities itself. That is generally the update I have for you on the site layout. Are there any questions before I move on to the architecture?
Okay, good for some hands. Nothing in the chat yet. Give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. You're up again.
Okay, you can always come back with questions, of course. So turning to the building architecture, the design team worked on several concepts, and we developed one concept that we called rolling fields. This concept is inspired by the landscape itself and the topography of the site. And we are working to combine elements of both the Pacific Northwest and the agrarian styles, which this group preferred based on our last discussions. We are using some of your preferences along with preferences we got from the open house participants, such as trying to blend the facilities into the site as much as possible. And to really accomplish that, we're using low, simple building forms with sloped roofs. Some of the roofs may be vegetated, other roofs may have solar panels on them. And we're also looking at the Columbia Gorge Scenic Area guidelines and taking some recommendations from there, such as using warm, dark earth tones on the buildings that will help blend it more into the surrounding landscape. Next slide.
Just want to pause real quick, Casey. Andrew had asked if we can say more about the stormwater management differences between the 2 site options. And I know that Ben's going to be getting into that shortly. So I just want to acknowledge that he had that comment.
Okay, yeah, I will let Ben address the stormwater stuff. The architectural team is now using this rolling fields concept to develop design guidelines. These guidelines will help us in the detailed design phase, which we're about to enter. And so buildings in this facility, we basically separate them into 2 types, non-process and process. Sort of the buildings where people are versus the buildings where machines are mostly. So non-process facilities are buildings like the administration building, the maintenance facility, and some ancillary facilities. And the image here is an example of the design guidelines we're working on that will give us some direction and ways to approach design this year, but also give us some flexibility as the design changes or the needs change of the building. So you can see guidelines here calling out how to treat roofs, how to incorporate eaves and overhangs, some of the building materials, mixing resilient materials like a concrete base with more warmer materials up high, and then how to mix in windows and provide functionality for the users in the building. So next slide is a concept rendering that shows the basic form and massing and some of the design guideline ideas for the administration building. This will basically be the front door of the facility where visitors would check in and most of the staff would be working. And this very preliminary idea reflects the general look and feel of the architecture. And we're going to be working this year to refine that, of course. And we're going to continue to take input from the site advisory group. And obviously we have to follow the code requirements of the county and the state, as well as city sustainability requirements. And of course, the good neighbor agreements, which we're working on with you right now. So before I move on, are there any comments or thoughts or feelings about the non-process design as it is now?
Let's see. Oh, let's see. We have a question from our guests. Are there any of these buildings open to the public? What % of the facility?
So in general, when the public signs up for a tour or is visiting staff, this administration building would be what would be considered open to the public. This would be where tours start and end, and where we may have some interpretive elements in the lobby for people to learn about the plant. So if you go on a tour, depending on what kind of tours they offer, you may see more buildings and more facilities, but this would be what would we consider your main public building. And the number of employees.
But I just wanted to clarify too, though, before we move on from that, Casey, that the visitors, it's not, the facility itself is not open to just anybody that comes in. It's an invited situation. So open to the public is still just for invited and
right.
the tours.
It's definitely for make a reservation with your tour group and you could come here. In terms of number of employees right now, I think there's between 15 and 20 employees that will be here for each shift. And I think it's mainly a daytime group of employees with a skeleton crew at night.
And
we're
Pat
still
also
working
had a
out. We're
question.
still working out the staffing numbers, I believe.
Yeah. Pat Meyer had a question. As an open atrium second story.
Oh, we are looking into maybe having a more welcoming tall space as you come into the lobby of the building. Yes, so we are trying to have some inviting public space here, but not at the not if it will take away space from the staff needs.
And how does that fit into the low profile model?
In general, we are still constrained by the height limit set by the county, which is 35 feet. So we don't expect to have buildings over that height limit. And so it does allow for 2-story buildings. But the way we want to articulate the roofs, as you can see here, to try to mimic that landscape of a rolling field should help minimize the visual impact of some of these taller buildings.
Pat has commented that it impedes viewpoints. And my understanding, Casey, is that maybe we will be able to provide those viewpoints or a perspective of those viewpoints from particular properties at some point in this design process.
Yeah, we can do that at a later date once we get this, the final concept modeled, but we are working to consider the views over this site to the horizon and Mount Hood and the sky views. And we do want to keep them below the existing tree line and not to impede anybody's view of the mountain especially. And there will be additional landscaping along the edges, which will help conceal the view of the facilities themselves.
And Patricia had put in a comment shortly after the question about the number of people employed at the administrative building, and it says just at the administrative building. So I'm guessing that you're clarifying that the number of employees that Casey was talking about was just at the administrative building. Is that correct, Patricia?
If that's what she meant, then that total number of employees includes engineers and maintenance staff and
people operating the facility.
Operators, yeah, that'd be everyone. Mm-hmm.
We need some clarity. Oh, let's see. So 15 in total.
Somewhere between 15 and 20 is what we're working with right now.
All right. Any other questions? And look for some hands here, or you can type in the chat, as so many of you have been doing so well. All right, I'm not seeing anything new, so let's go ahead and go on with the presentation.
Okay, so so similar to non-process buildings, for the process facilities, we are also working on similar design guidelines. Process facilities include buildings such as the chemical building, the dewatering building, the ozone generation facility, and the main treatment basins. The image here is an example of the general guidelines applied to the process buildings. Similar, but also different than like the admin building. We still want to move forward with some strategies that give us the flexibility to change things as the building changes due to the engineering requirements, the treatment process, et cetera, this year. And so here you see these similar guidelines, but with an example of a variation in the color where we may want to explore a blue-gray type color. None of the colors are set in stone. This is just an example of how the guidelines may play out and help us achieve a unified facility once it's all done. So additional design guidelines are going to be developed for the other facilities, such as the concrete basins, where a lot of the actual filtration happens. And in addition, the landscape architects, of course, are working on the landscape buffers, the guidelines for the vegetation, and those are under development. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. So all of this hopefully provides us guidance to reduce the visual impact of this facility, help it blend into the landscape better, and help it fit in with the agrarian and Pacific Northwest styles of the region. So any more, let's see, I'm gonna go to questions now.
Yeah, I have a question from Pat. How does the storage tank height compare to the existing Pleasant Home tanks?
These storage tanks, which we're planning, I think are about 40 feet tall to 50 feet tall, whereas the Pleasant Home tanks that are existing, the 2 tanks existing now, I think are 110 feet tall. So they'll be approximately half as tall, I think. And these would be some of the tallest, I think the tallest tanks on the site are here at the chemical building. Okay.
Let's see if we have any other questions here. I don't see any other hands.
So, sorry, I forgot I have one more slide, just another perspective view of this chemical building, the next slide. It is one of the larger buildings on site. It has a lot of storage tanks in it and operating space within it. This is nestled kind of in the center of our development. And this is a view from the internal plant road. From a neighbor's perspective, you'd never really see this point of view. You'd see the shorter end on the right, perhaps. But maybe not so much even with the landscape strategies that Ben's going to talk about. So, so with that, we can always come back later with more questions, comments. We welcome any ideas. I know I've read Jane's comments from last time that hopefully I feel like we're in alignment with some of Jane's thoughts about the architecture and the materials. So we look forward to continue working with you guys on this. And now I will turn it over to Ben from NNA Landscape Architecture to discuss the stormwater strategies.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my purpose tonight is to talk briefly about stormwater management, our stormwater management strategy. Before I do that, I want to recap the landscape design concept that was influenced by you, the site advisors. Just briefly, our preliminary landscape concept was developed in concert with the site plan that Casey talked about earlier. The western half of the site will be the primary development area of the filtration facility. and that leaves the east kind of not untouched, and the pipeline will likely has to come in from the east, but the remainder of the site isn't really slated to have permanent improvements. But the whole site will be touched in some way during construction and to build the pipeline to deliver water to and from the site. So any area that does not have buildings or paving as a finished condition will be vegetated in some manner unless it's rededicated for agricultural use. At the western portion of the site where the filtration facility is concentrated, we're imagining that the facility will have a security fence surrounding it with controlled gates for access points. The fence will be located away from the property edges so that it can be hidden from view. And so we started to talk about inside the fence and outside the fence. So inside the fence means the facility area. And we're proposing a more managed and organized landscape there, but still using primarily native plant pellet. Some of the landscape areas will have vegetated stormwater swales and basins incorporated to manage runoff from pavements and structures. Also, I probably would make a note, we're discussing green roofs as well. So the building roofs may actually be part of the landscape. Outside the fence, between the facility and the property lines, we're proposing a more natural landscape that might include forested areas with evergreen trees and understory, similar to the hillside at the eastern edge of our site. Also meadow areas with stands of native trees, and also stormwater swales and basins there to convey water from to the 3 low points that are on the site. Stormwater currently leaves the site at these 3 low points, and I'll get into more of that later. Leftover portions of the site that are not used for this facility are being considered for future agricultural use, but we haven't really gotten into that discussion yet. So more on that later this year. So quickly talking about the stormwater strategy, and to answer that one question about between the 2 schemes, the north scheme and the south scheme, it wouldn't have mattered which scheme was selected. The stormwater strategy is really tied to the characteristics of the piece of property and the surrounding properties. Stormwater naturally flows off the site onto neighboring property, currently at 3 low points. One is at the near the midpoint of the western property line. It also leads directly into Johnson Creek at the southwest corner, and it leaves the east part of the site at the southeast corner. The soils are heavy in nature, and once saturated, they don't infiltrate at a very high rate. So that's a large consideration for us. We plan to manage runoff from the new paved surfaces and buildings and not increase the volume of stormwater leaving the site today. We hope to manage the higher storm events. So we were kind of thinking about what happened Tuesday, and Jason looked up, and I guess the average rainfall was 1 inch on Tuesday. And so I'm kind of wondering now how this site and the neighboring sites sort of manage that. Our design goal is to manage the 25-year event, even though we're only, I think we're required to manage a 10-year event. We'll use vegetated facilities throughout the site to treat, convey, and slow down the movement of stormwater. We'll establish trees and understory and general vegetation to help mitigate stormwater through uptake in large trees, as well as just spending more time on site so that evaporation can actually help that stormwater equation. We'll manage flows to the 3 low points of the site. Actually, I should have had you, yeah, you are on the next slide. Thanks for switching that slide. We'll manage the flows to the 3 low points and on the neighboring property at acceptable levels, and manage the peak storms and avoid overflows. So in December, we actually had a little site tour with neighbors and stakeholders. Pat, Dean, Sean, and Daniel were present. And here's some of my notes from that, and they're just kind of random. A few don't relate to stormwater, but what we found out, soil has been eroding from the Water Bureau site for some time, probably due to runoff. The Water Bureau property has an old system of drain tile that has pipe daylighting into a depression at the west property line. Locations of the tiles have never been mapped, so we don't exactly know where they all are. You can see them when they daylight. There's some concern that the Water Bureau development will make runoff unmanageable for neighboring properties. Large storm events can overrun the neighbor's provisions to handle runoff. And runoff to Johnson Creek occurs without any systems to capture or meter flow from the southwest corner of the site near the irrigation well. The fence along the east property line was installed by Surface Nursery to keep an elk herd from crossing onto the property. Runoff migrates from the Water Bureau site onto property at the east somehow below the surface of the perimeter road, at least that's what I understand. It runs through their driveway area and is not a huge volume, but is something that has to be managed every year. And as we walked along the south property line, one of the group walked further south to Johnson Creek and followed it to the west, where it comes near the Water Bureau site's southwest corner. And it was noted that drain tile was daylighting into the creek along that route from adjacent fields, and seems to be a common practice along the whole creek corridor, all the way to Portland probably, to make land more suitable for agriculture. So with that, I want to pause here, and the site advisors that were part of that tour, if you have anything you want to say to the whole group, this is your opportunity.
This is Daniel. Just a few things, and thank you, Ben. I think that really encapsulates some of the things we learned. It was a real aha moment for me. When we were there at the site visit, there had been a fairly moderate rain a couple days earlier, 2 or 3 days earlier, so there was still a fair amount of runoff. And I'm glad you have this north site slide up on the screen, because if we look at the western edge right about the middle, that's kind of where the water runs off. And one of the things that I remember hearing was that probably close to 60% of the runoff from the entire property goes to that point, maybe 20% to the Johnson Creek site in the south, and then perhaps the final 20% off into the Sandy Basin or somewhere in the far eastern. Is that, Ben, was that kind of what you remembered we heard?
It's pretty close. I think the percentage at the Midwestern property line is more like 50 and a little higher at the southwest corner, but you're pretty close about the east.
Okay, so one of the things that jumps out at me when I see this, the north site, is that there isn't as much room on that western edge to have stormwater detention, just because the property is moved over toward the west. So I think, you know, either way you do this, the stormwater is going to be pretty challenging. And we saw from talking to the nursery owner who's just downstream that he does receive a lot of flooding. So there's already flooding going off into the property. So I think anything that's done is definitely going to benefit the downstream property owners as well. I like your idea of really increasing the conifer plantings on this property, because as you mentioned, there's really heavy clay soil here, and the combination of the clay soil and the drainage tiles, which are anywhere from 2 to 5 feet subsurface, it just means that there's really not a lot of natural storage for the water on the site, not a lot of infiltration capacity. So that the impervious surface additions for this project, I think, are going to be challenging to mitigate. And I think the more space that you can devote to detention ponds of some design, the better it's going to be. And that, combining it with additional conifer plantings, because conifers, of course, are going to continue to do a lot of evapotranspiration year round will be really good. As I understand, Ben, was this correct that the soil borings that were done on this site went down 30 feet and they still found a high percentage of clay in the soil? Was that correct?
Yes, I think it was actually 40 feet. Can somebody else answer that? But yes, the Geotech pretty much said don't expect infiltration, at least at their boring locations. They didn't think that once the soil is saturated, it's just not going to accept any more water.
So probably the idea that we could have some kind of dry well or something is really not feasible here, just because the depth of the clay soil is so great.
No, I think that's right. And even having a deep dry well, we talked about that very early on in the first meeting I attended, and that was not, there's geotechnical issues from that kind of thing. And
sure.
This facility is dependent on it being structurally or geotechnically sound.
Yeah, so I guess I know I'm talking a long time, but just my summary comments are, I think we should really think about devoting a significant amount of space toward retention ponds and continue with that aggressive conifer planting strategy. And also really look at the impact on the downstream nursery owner to the west there, because that potentially could be big. He's already getting flooding.
Understood.
All right, we have a question in the chat from Dean and Pat. Is the road on the east side of the PWD property, or is that a road on the east side of the PWD property? How close is the road to our property to the east? If that is a perimeter road, how many trucks or cars will use that road? And we do not want traffic sounds in our backyard. Will this road be used during facility construction? That's a lot of questions, but I think we can handle it. I don't know if that's an appropriate question for you though, Ben.
I'm going to pass that to others because, and I think that Casey had mentioned that this is, I guess, the concept we've had been working on for several months, but the access road issue is sort of, that hasn't evolved much. So anyway, Casey or Jeff or.
Yeah, I could reiterate, Dean and Pat, I'm afraid we cannot answer any of these questions right now. What you see is a concept based on a general notion of how to maintain as much agricultural land as we might be able to. There is a lot of study happening still about the alignments of both the north and south access road, the property easements that'll have to be required. And I would say this year, look forward to more detailed discussions between the Water Bureau and the design team and your fellow neighbors to really figure this one out. It's going to be a tough nut to crack, but we will work with you guys to mitigate all the issues that you raise right now about traffic and noise and impacts. So I'm sorry I don't have anything better for you, but we do have team members working on it in earnest.
Okay, well, they say okay and thank you. Andrew, you had your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Benita, and thanks, Ben. I just wanted to reiterate Daniel's concerns. I think we also want to see as much of the property retained for agriculture as possible, but that is a lot of impervious surface for the stormwater. And in our experience doing swales at a much smaller scale, once those soils are saturated, there's little or nothing that infiltrates. But having robust vegetation cover over a larger area will help for sure. But that area to the middle on the west of the property is very tight to be managing the load.
All right, just want to acknowledge we have just 4 minutes left, and I see there's a question from Lori in our audience, and it says, what is the projected price up to now that we're seeing facility design in fall 2019? It was estimated at 1.2 billion, and architect's phase, I'm not really sure what that part means, but yeah, we're still in that price range. We haven't worked out any additional pricing on that yet. Dave, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In fall of 2019, what we presented to City Council was that the combined program of the pipelines and the filtration facility in 2019 dollars was $820 million. And of that, the filtration facility was $445 million. We are in the process now that we have these concepts of putting pricing to that. And so we're working on ways to try to ensure that the prices stay in the neighborhoods that we discussed with City Council. At the time, I mean, the 1.2 billion, that's an extrapolation of what we said was it was $820 million with a plus 50 and a minus 30 range around that. Now that we have these designs, we're going to be able to narrow that range down. So I mentioned earlier that we are working on the basis of design report that will come out in the spring. With that report, we'll have updated costs that we'll talk about what these facilities are running now. So it looks like it's still in the same neighborhood.
So your additional question says concept or design development for phase question is for the architect. Are we in the, is your question that we are asking if we are in the concept or design development phase? Lori? What phase is the architect currently working on? We're in the design phase. Is there?
So we finished up the pre-design, and that's the concept that's being shared in the basis of design report, and then we're going through here. And now we're getting, as we finalize these choices, we'll be moving into design and actually start putting buildings onto drawing sheets, and we'll progress over the next 2 years through that design. Did you have other things to add, Casey? Or?
Yeah, since they're an architect too, I could tell them that we just did finish up the conceptual design phase for the basis of design report. And then once all of that gets approved and they set us off on the next phase, we'll be in 30% design. And I think the goal is to complete or almost complete 60% design by the end of this year. It might be January or February of next year, but we do hope to get about halfway through design this year.
And I don't want to keep everybody too long, but I do see there's one more question about the loan, and we have not received notification about that yet. I know that they're still working out some details on that, but trust me, when we find out, we will be letting people know. If the design affects our view, how does the consultation change the design? Casey, did you want to answer
That's
that?
a good question. I think what we'd like to do is work with this group to figure out the best ways to communicate design this year as we get more visualizations, better ways to show you what you need to see. We'll be touching base with you guys either in this forum or maybe a survey style forum to show you where the design's at. as we're working through the good neighbor agreements, we should talk about the communications and how that's going to roll out and continue through the design phase with the neighbors. And then we hope to have, and we may already have, close to the digital models that we could, you know, similar to where these views are taken from the model, we could go to your house in the model and show you what you're going to see and see if it passes the test, I guess. So I think through the landscape strategy and the design concept, we hope to, you know, protect your views and maybe even enhance your views to some extent. And so we do want to work through ways to continue to check in with the site advisory group and the neighbors to make sure this is successful. And, you know, soliciting feedback where it's appropriate is going to be key. And as we get more information about the visual and the acoustic impacts of the development, we'll continue to check in with you to keep you up to date and get your feedback.
So, and will it be too late at that point?
Well, it's never too late until we're building buildings and breaking ground, but that's what we hope to do this year, is to solidify the design, get your buy-off to the extent that it affects you, and to make sure that we meet the good neighbor agreements. Our goal is to keep everyone happy and build the best plant possible. So that's our dual goal.
Okay. I see Patricia has put in there, she wants to answer to her second part of her question, which is where's the other 51% of the cost of the project coming from? And I mean, we are at 7:33. I don't want to put off your question by any stretch of the imagination. I know we've had a lot of discussions just between the two of us about the cost of the project. And the focus of this meeting is the architecture and the design. And if it's a continuing conversation that we want to have, we can certainly set up a meeting at one of our site advisory group meetings to go more into the cost. It's hard to try to weave it into these other conversations that we're having. So I don't know if anyone else has a thought on that, about whether that would be something you would be interested in hearing, because I think it does get a good perspective of how we need to balance what your needs and your concerns are in terms of the design and how the costs affect that, because we can't do it all. We can't keep the costs low and keep to do everything that we need to do. Because I thought this question would be answered tonight. I believe I answered that in that email to you, but if you, but again, I'm sorry that you're disappointed about not having this answer tonight, but we can certainly have a separate meeting about costs. If you just want that particular question answered, we can provide some documentation. I'm open to ideas, but I don't want to keep this to you would like to hear. So let's set up a meeting, our next meeting is actually going to be on construction, but we can certainly have a meeting that's dedicated to costs. So that way we can be focused on the topic and not have all of the other issues that we are trying to do at the same time. Does that seem fair for everybody, or do we want to stay longer to talk about costs? Yeah, short answer is money. Ratepayers pay for it. That is Jane's comment. Patricia says, I would like to know how we are paying for this. Next month will be fine. Well, next month we do have our construction contractors coming. And so we do want to give them the opportunity, for you the opportunity to hear that. If we're interested in to have some other conversations in the meantime, or if there's something that we can post on our website that would make it more helpful, let me know about that. Dave, did you want to address any of that?
Yeah, I would ask, if you're willing to wait till March, I think what we can do with that is we should have our updated costs for these facilities as they've been laid out. We can talk about that. We can bring our finance person that can talk about how this has been factored into rates as we move into the future. And I had a third thing there. It would just give us some more time to give you more updated details on the costs and where these are going. So if March would be okay, I think we could give you the most complete picture of the current state of the financing of the project.
Not something that we can just, it's not a simple issue, and I do think it would warrant having our finance person here to be a part of the conversation. So thank you. If we can pause that for now and let people enjoy the rest of their evening, and next meeting, if you can scroll through So for our next meeting, we'll be talking about facility construction. We do have a lot more to talk about with design, so I'll be keeping you posted on that as well, because I know in March we were planning on having some more discussion about the Good Neighbor Agreement, but it sounds like we're going to talk about costs at that time. And then we will also want to have some more conversations about the design. As Casey mentioned earlier, we're through this process, and there's a lot of touch points, and there's just a lot to try to get through in a meeting. And if as we're working through this process, we're going to want to have your input as we get involved. So I hope that you all have a great evening. And did you want to close this out, Dave?
Yeah, I reiterate that. Hope you have a great evening. We really thank you for your time and your input as you each month. And this is great feedback. And we hope that you're finding the information useful. If you have questions or thoughts, I was thinking about the financing costs. If you have specific questions you'd like to answer, I see you've gotten a kind of a line of them going. If you want to shoot those to Benita, we can certainly structure a presentation around making sure we get your specific questions answered too. So do please feel free to send that along. So be safe and be healthy as we go forward, and glad to see you again here in this new year.